Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut live stream. How you guys doing today? It's a fine Saturday over here. Hope everybody is enjoying their weekend, having a good day. Well, today I was filming some interesting videos for you guys, and tomorrow as well. And then for the next 2 weeks, we're gonna be chilling back from filming. Of course, just editing and pushing the video out. But I don't know if you guys noticed this. I film in batches. I'll have 1 week where I sleep 3 hours every day and film, and then for the next 2 weeks, just relax, edit, and kind of spend time with family and chill back. Having said that, guys, I hope everybody is already here. I see you guys starting to pop up, so let's do this. Let's start with a question. I want to give you guys the most time for questions. So Renee Lopez says, what should I do with my pre-owned 2017 Highlander purchased in March that blows cool but not cold AC? So the first thing you want to do is, if this was a certified car, if this was, I don't know, purchased from a dealership under warranty or something of that nature, you want to contact that dealership. The first thing they're going to do is recharge the AC, see what's going on. Maybe there's a small leak somewhere. Sometimes leaks are hard to find with AC, and what is typically done by professionals is recharge the system, let it go. Sometimes we'll add a small amount of dye. When the car comes back, we'll be able to see the leak better with the black light. The dye shines in the black light, so you'll be able to see the leak better and fix the component that's leaking, and life is good. But usually that's an indication of a low charge. So John Koger says, I have a 2009 Corolla during the winter after cold soak. The variable time log rattles on startup for 1-2 seconds. Should I fix this or wait until it gets worse? Can it kill the engine? So if the rattle only happens when you let the car sit for over 8 hours, like overnight, potentially you're just starting with a variable valve timing. And what needs to be done to fix this is to replace the intake VVTi gear, variable valve timing gear. It's just a timing gear that the camshaft, that the timing chain, connects to, and it does connect to the camshaft. Not a major job, but it can get a little expensive. These gears are expensive. You have time. You're going to get to a point where, unfortunately, every time you start the car, you're going to hear that rattle. That will be your cue that it's time to fix it. But for now, depending on the finances, of course, it's gonna need to be taken care of. It's not gonna get better. It could take a long time before it really gets bad, but depending on the finances, when you're able, get it fixed. But if you want to wait it out, it's gonna kill the engine. But before it does, it's gonna give you big indications. It could potentially rattle all the time, or the rattle that is now 1-2 seconds is going to be 5-10 seconds sometimes. So keep an eye on it. If you hear it not progressing, you're good. Carmen Montecalvo says, 2008 Toyota Prius just changed the PCV valve after 223,000 miles. How far should it thread in? The last 2 threads in the valve were really hard to tighten down. Be very careful, because some of these don't go flush. Some of them will just sit halfway. You do want to look up the torque spec. You can go to techinfo.toyota.com, get the repair manual, get the torque spec, but you want to torque these down. They do have, some of them will come with thread lock already on, so it makes it kind of harder to install. But do not over tighten these, because you could actually crack the valve cover, and that's not good. But torque it down to spec. If it torques down to spec, you're done, you're good, life is good. Lexus, man, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you. I hope you're having a good day. So Francisco Miranda, if I do the repair, can I drive to the car right after changing the parts to the nearest Toyota dealership to have them do the computer update? This is in regards to the EGR. Okay, so what Francisco is asking, I recently did a video on EGR valves on 3rd generation Prius 2010 and 15. If you do some EGR work, you need to do that software update, which is part of the repair. It's very important. Before I go to the dealership, Francisco, and for everybody else who's interested that did this repair DIY, but now you want to do the update, call around, call for dealerships. This is where it helps to know somebody at the dealership, maybe an advisor, maybe a technician, even a porter sometimes. If you know someone at dealership, life will go easier. But some dealerships will flat accept. You just call them, hey, I'm working on my own car. I did the repair. I just want you guys to do the software update based on this TSB. I already did the updated parts. Explain to them, talk to them. Some dealerships will have problems with it. Most dealerships will be like, well, we won't guarantee anything or warranty anything. Of course, they did not do the complete repair. They're just doing the software update. You are warrantying the work that you did right. So that's to be expected. But otherwise, you'll find a dealership should be easily to do the update once you explain to them everything. So Albedo, I drive my 4Runner TRD 5-6 times a year on 650 highway miles trips. I stop for bathroom and gas fill up only. Average 75 miles with a few higher when cruising. Is this considered severe used? So it depends, because the 5-6 times a year, 650 mile stops, that's not severe, but what's in between that could be considered. So you want to review the stuff in your owner's manual, but the biggest thing is short trips, less than 5 miles an hour, extensive idling. What was the other one that is very common? Driving very cold weather, very hot weather. These are the things that are considered severe. And in the case of your 4Runner, oil changes, I would go with the severe one, because trust me, 5,000 mile oil change, especially if you keep this thing long, you'll regret them. So Jake Duncan says, just got a 2021 Tacoma and have 800 miles on it. When should I do my first oil change? Window sticker says 6 months or 5,000 miles. Is that okay? That's okay. If you want to take it to the next level, you want to wear the car care nut badge, do it at 1,000 miles, regardless of time. 1,000 miles, do it an oil change. Just change the oil, change the filter, and then again at 5,000 miles, and then after that, every 5,000 miles or 6 months, and you will be golden, my friend. Nosgoth, 2012, Scion TC, was driving home when the overheating light came on the coolant. Sorry, the coolant is full with no leaks. Could it be a bad water pump or bad thermostat? It's very possible in this case, because some of these do not have a gauge, and that's the weird thing about these with the heat light. You do want to check the actual temperature. Hook up a scan tool capable of reading data. Look at the temperature when the light comes on. It could be just a faulty sensor. If the engine's really not overheating, use a temp light to check the temperature. Is it overheating? That's where you want to start with, because water pump could do it, thermostat could do it, but you want to investigate how much you were overheating and why, since you don't have coolant loss. So Jose Burgo says, what are common noises for bad drive shaft on a RAV4 2007 V6? Mine's making a clicking sound from 13 to 20 miles an hour. After that, the noise disappears under the car. So in this type of situations, in-person diagnosis is very important, and we're gonna kind of want to do the diagnosis in person. But the drive shaft typically will cause a vibration in addition to noise. The common thing, and I'll tell you this, and this is gonna sound a little too simple, check for rocks in the wheels. That's the first thing I would look at. And then you're gonna wanna lift the car on jack stands and put it in drive, let the wheel spin until you hear the noise, kind of investigate. Could be an axle, could be something stuck on the wheel, something stuck around the brakes. That's how you wanna start. But typically the drive shaft, you're gonna have vibration accompanied by the noise. Wouldn't hurt to check it, check the U-joint, check everything else, but that's what I would do. I would lift it up and kind of try to listen to the noise when you're outside. So John Mika says, how much is the trans drain and fill for 14 ES350? Do you do side jobs? So my schedule is extremely full. Drain and fill, I would have to look it up and give you prices exactly for parts and everything. If you want to wait, because you could be waiting for a month here, if you're not in a rush, send me an email. In the subject of the email, write Chicago service request. All emails like that do not go to me. They actually get transferred to Mrs. Car Care Nut, who handles the scheduling for this kind of stuff. So make sure you write that Chicago service request, because I'm really backed up on emails and I can't keep up with them. It's very difficult to keep up with them at this point. So I'm trying to get there here and there, but this kind of email will get pushed to the side and I won't get it. Actually, Mrs. Car Care Nut will get it. and she will schedule you in. All right. Let us see. So Chris Fostick, thoughts? Just bought 2021 RAV4 XSE hybrid. I drive under 7,000 miles per year. Do I still need to take the car in service every 6 months? Yes, that is a big thing. If you're gonna drive low miles, you're gonna want to stick with time. 6 months. If you're gonna drive low miles, you're likely gonna take short trips, repeated short trips. That actually puts you under severe service, which means you need to do the 5,000 mile oil changes. You might have to pay out of pocket if you have the free maintenance plan, but read into the owner's manual, especially there's a section at the bottom where it lists the maintenance. It'll tell you special operating conditions. Read those, and whatever applies to you, you actually need to follow it. And that's how people get themselves in the maintenance problem where, 10 years later, 100,000 miles later, we have problems. Well, the maintenance was not followed. Well, nobody told me. Well, you need to read into it. It's a little vague because it's very small writing, but you want to look into it. But yes, every 6 months, absolutely, in low mile cars. So Jose Burgos, the U-joint and the RAV4 should not have any play. No, U-joints should not have absolutely zero play in Toyotas. So let's go back. Let me find where we were at because the page jumped again. I love how the chat always just jumps and goes all over the place. Let's see. Here we go. LT, do you just work on Toyotas professionally, and do you also work on Lexus models? Is there any meaningful difference between the two besides the luxury finish trim? So I do work on Lexus, not as much as Toyota because I work at a Toyota dealership, but honestly, they're exactly the same. Sorry to say that. An ES350, for example, is exactly the same as an Avalon, except, of course, the body and the stuff you can touch and see. But otherwise, they share the same engines. Sometimes they're made in the same plant. And then your LX570, which is the $100,000 behemoth, is a Land Cruiser. That's nothing different. And many models are the same. Yes, the IS is its own thing, but it shares engines and components and stuff with the other models. Lexus is a Toyota, 100%, except the luxury factor and the finish and all the equipment. And usually Lexus will get newer technology first. Toyota's been doing this for a while. They use Lexus as a test bed for new stuff. In order to stay competitive, the luxury market is different than the mainstream A to B cars like Toyotas. The luxury market, they need to be ahead of the game, so they have to rush stuff out. So they kind of tested in the Lexus side, and then you'll see them in Toyota later where they've had the chance to put Kaizen and kind of perfect things. But that's the truth about Lexus. They're nothing. Some people call them glorified Toyotas, which there's some truth to that, but they're nice. They're nicer material, more quiet and everything. But are they significantly different? They're not. They share the same technology in the end. So Juiced Gunner says, is there a technique for checking oil on a 21 Toyota RAV4? The oil always just seems smear all over the dipstick. So you're going to want to, don't pull the dipstick with force. Kind of pull it lightly. And this is where it gets kind of difficult. You don't want to move the dipstick as you're pulling it out because as you're pulling it out, you want to kind of one straight swipe couple times. Another thing is turn it. Sometimes you'll see one side smeared, turn it, and you'll see the other side is fine. I've heard about this from a lot of folks that are having the smearing issue, but it just takes a little bit of practice. And usually it happens when the engine is hot. If it's giving you a hard time, try to check it when it's cold. But just remember, you're going to be halfway between full and low when you're cold. When it's 100% cold, just start the engine, let it run for a minute or two, shut it off, check it, and be on your way. So Kim, my 2000 Tundra with a 5VZ FE 3.4 liter engine runs great, 253K. Just learned the idle air control can be cleaned. Is this something I should do since it's never been cleaned, even though the truck is running good? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you don't have problems with this is something about especially old cars. Like, I don't say this in a derogatory way. It's a 2000. It's 22 years old. That is considered old in the car world. You do not want to disturb things if you don't need to. If the truck runs good, idles good, you don't have concerns, leave it alone. When you got a concern, then deal with it, because you go take that idle air control and this hose broke and that valve broke and this screw is, now you're just opening a can of worms for something that you don't have a problem with. I wouldn't, honestly, I would just leave it alone, call it a day, and life is good. So Eric Atkinson, if I were to bring you my 2017 manual Tacoma, would you shoot a video on how to drain and fill the trans? Yeah, bring it over. Again, send an email, Chicago service request on the subject of the email, and we'll get back to you. So Nick Grant, what's the best oil to run in a 5.7 Tundra? Well, 5.7 Tundra, you could have 530, 520, 020, depends on the year and where you're at. You can run all three. The ideal one is 5W20. The 020s will be synthetic. I would run synthetic. I would change it every 5,000 miles. Personally, I love the Toyota oil, mainly because it's designed and formulated for these cars. Secondly, because I could just walk across the aisle and get it from parts. I don't have to go shopping somewhere else for it. But yeah, if you've had an oil that you've been using for years and years, continue using it. You've had good success with it. Why not? But if you're just shopping for oil, use the Toyota oil. Sometimes it'll be competitive price-wise. Use the one that is recommended by your manual or on the oil cap. So Mike Gamble, I have a 2006 RX 330. The transmission seems to slip between second and third gear sometimes. Should I have the dealership look at it? Is it failing? So actually, that is a common thing with these. It's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not more of a slip, but it's more like a weird shift. This is common with these, and this is also common on the Highlander and even the Sienna, some Siennas with that transmission. Honestly, the most thing I would do, depending how many miles you have on this, change the fluid, make sure it's the right, correct fluid level. On that, something that old, disconnect the battery overnight, reconnect it, drive it, and see what happens. I don't want you digging into this and making a big concern over this. The car is a little older. You don't want to start spending money on something that hasn't completely failed. I understand the concern, but you go to a dealership, they're going to do all this, and they're going to tell you, okay, well, you need a trans rebuild or a new trans. Now you're spending a small fortune on something that could have lasted 10 more years before it really becomes a big problem. So try to fix it try to do the basics. Check the fluid, change it if you can, if it's not too dark. Disconnect the battery overnight. That resets some of the memories on those old ones. See what happens. If it improves or it gets better, great. If it doesn't, I would keep an eye on it, but continue to drive it. When it starts progressing, where now you have a big slippage or whatever, then deal with it. But personally, I would drive it. It's older. You're not going to invest that kind of money in a car like that. And you could be driving it the way it is right now for 10 more years, and it's exactly the same. So that's just my opinion. So Shaw G Autos, how many times should the ABS pump in the 2006 Prius buzz when braking? After 2-3 pumps, mine buzzes every 2 braking applications. So it's hard to put an exact number of how many times, but you can actually go in a scan tool and see the pressure and see where it's at. It's basically going to buzz every time the pressure drops below a certain point. Could be 2 pumps, could be 3. Don't compare it the same person, the same model car, or same year, because if your friend tells you, well, mine does it every 3, do you have the same foot strength? You don't. So that's where I would be careful with that. But I'm not concerned, but I just want to say this, I'm not concerned about every 2 brake pedal applications the pump comes on. That should be normal. The only thing is when the pump, you're not applying the brakes and it's coming on every minute or every 30 seconds, then we might have something going on. But otherwise, I wouldn't worry about it. So the Blade Gray channel, slight smell of gas only on a cold start and lasts for a couple minutes. I can't notice anything. Should I be worried? No warning lights. So many things you can look at. One of them is, do you have an evap leak that's lingering right now and eventually gonna show up? Could be something as small as a bad gas cap. Could be you have a very small exhaust leak that is not really audible, but it's small enough where it's leaking some of the combustion gases. Remember, when cars start and they're cold, they're gonna run pig rich, and you might smell some gas from the exhaust, and that's typical. That's completely normal. But you're mentioning on a cold start, and that could be normal, but I would look at that exhaust really good. Best way to check the exhaust, take a rag or a towel or something. You want to have the car up in the air, makes it much easier. Have someone block the exhaust. If there's any leaks, immediately gonna make a hissing sound, and you'll hear it very clearly. And that's the easiest way to check for exhaust leaks. They're very small like that, where you can't really hear them. So, Spider Logan, thank you so much for joining the super chat, sir. I appreciate it. Jorge Rodriguez, I have a 2015 Toyota Sienna, and I have some popping noises coming from the back as I pull out off the driveway and accelerate from a stop. This seems to be coming from the sliding door. Thoughts? Yes, that is a common problem. The door needs to, there's a little, I don't know what I want to call a striker, but there's a little alignment pin that is notorious to be kind of off, and it'll start making the door rattle. There's a simple procedure. You'll see like a little striker and a little sitting area where it sits. You're gonna loosen that, put a rag, close the door, open it, tighten it. It should do it. If you're not DIY, dealership can do this very easily. It's very common on these, and nothing really big or falling apart, but it's very annoying. So I would, if it bothers you, get it taken care of. So Canadian guy, I'm about to pick up a RAV4 all-wheel drive 2021. Your videos helped me. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and best of luck to you. I hope you get it soon and you love the car and it serves you well. So Farshid Fatouhi, sometimes my 2016 Highlander hybrid does not start. It says hybrid system stopped working, put it in park, depress the brake. I do that to go. I wait for a few minutes. It starts. Okay. So the first things first, let's do our battery checks. Check the 12-volt battery. Even though it starts after a while, check the 12-volt battery. Second thing you want to check is the key battery. Especially if you have this should be a smart key. Check the smart key battery. That's the second thing. The thing that I'm concerned about is a 12-volt battery, not a hybrid battery. Hybrid battery is fine, but the 12-volt battery. This is how they start, the 12-volt battery on hybrids. They'll drop in voltage enough where you turn the key on, and there's that drop in because all the electronics came on, and that dip in voltage just throws the computers off. Now they can't even know what's what, and they just jam like that. You turn the key off. You give them a second, they kind of catch up because they're still on and communicating. You turn the key on again, now they're fine and everything is fine. Do get that 12-volt battery checked. That's the first thing. Just know that they're going to be a little expensive, more than your average 12-volt battery, but if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. What are you going to do? So Joseph Blank, I found that my RAV4 2019 hybrid doesn't carry tire pressure sensors, those things that are normal for Toyota LE, or is this for this particular model? They should have sensors, but you might have looked at the rubber valve stem and assumed they don't have sensors. They do have sensors. If this is a US model, know that some Canadian models do not have tire pressure monitor because they were different. They have different rules, different regulations. 19 possibly they all do at this point, but if you see just a rubber valve stem and you are in the US, this does have a sensor, but it is the kind of the new style sensor where you can replace the valve stem separate from the sensor in case it breaks, which is actually the cool new kid on the block, which is really nice. So if you have that and you're in the US, you're likely have the sensor but have the new style ones. So Dennis Liberty, I hope I read your name correct. If it's not, I apologize. 2021 Corolla Hybrid. Noticed once what it felt like a transmission slip when I had to accelerate real fast from a standstill position What should I look for rule out possible transmission problems? Well, the first thing I will tell you is hybrids cannot have a slip because there's no clutch. There's actually nothing to slip. But sometimes hybrids in specific, like when the stars line up with the moon, just the right upside way down, they will have like a jitter or just a lag where the computer is trying to figure out, okay, who's driving and what's going on. If you watch my series on how hybrids work, there's a lot involved computer-wise, how they start driving. So you said I had to accelerate real fast from a stand position. That's the moment where all of a sudden we're sitting down, relaxing. You accelerate very hard, the computers will just go, whoa, who's driving? Engine, there's a momentary lag, and that might be what you're feeling as a slip. There is no slip. I don't think you have an issue unless this is happening every time you accelerate normally. Then potentially, but usually these systems, they're smart enough where they're going to set codes and you're going to know about it immediately when there's an actual problem. I think this is a normal characteristics of the car. This should be a newer car. Take it to a dealership, explain to them the situation, have them take it for a drive, make sure they don't see anything obvious. Otherwise, I think you're all good, and that is just a momentary hiatus as the thing takes off. So Michael Era, I have 2021 Sienna Hybrid. As you know, the engine starts and stops all the time. Does this behavior has any negative impact on the engine, especially when the car is on high speed? And Michael, you're also asking another question. I'll read it real quick. With leaving the AC on when turning the car off, has any negative impact when the car is started the next time? So, hold on, I'm reading this again. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So the first thing is, hybrids have been around for a long time. Initially, that was the biggest concern. Wait a second, you're driving on the highway and you're flooring it down. All of a sudden, the engine comes up and goes. That is normal. And that actually does not affect the engine because engine pressure builds up very quick on these. They didn't sit overnight. Hybrid engines don't shut off for hours and hours and all of a sudden they start. I mean, it's only minutes, 10 minutes maybe. In 10 minutes, you still have some oil. Oil is already warmed up. Things are ready to go, and you're just going to get things moving very quick. The other thing is, so I would not worry about that at all. The second thing is, don't worry about leaving the AC on. And this is just not just for hybrids. This is for all models. The newer cars, they're very smart. The minute you shut off the car, the AC shuts off and nothing happened. But when you start it, it's not going to immediately engage AC like you just had a light switch on in your outlet in the house. It's actually going to wait for the car to start and everything to stabilize, and it's going to check the pressure, it's going to check everything, then it's going to engage the AC. So it actually doesn't really matter whether you leave it on or not. Usually most people, I am one of them, leave the AC on auto and kind of set it and forget it. It's 72 degrees in the US. Can't tell right off the top of my head where that translates to Celsius, but you can do the conversion. But 72 degrees, set it and forget it, winter or summer. So Tiffany Davis, can I use sunshade to help keep the heat out of my RAV4? I read somewhere that this could cause electronics on the windshield to overheat. No, you can use it. I mean, the camera, the front recognition camera on the windshield, if this is the newest RAV4, it has a front row seat to heat, regardless if you put the shield or not. I would say go ahead and use it. You should have no issues at all. So PM, what was the answer to the above question about the AC? So PM, you're going to want to go back and see the live stream because I answered a few AC questions. I was not sure which one you were referring to. So Christian Mondragon, I have spilled coffee repeatedly at my automatic shifter on 2008 Corolla. Could that damage it? Yes, it could. However, what it's going to damage is where we want to talk about. So you want to look at the operation. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If the shifter is shifting fine, and the one check you want to do, and there's a little lock solenoid inside these shifters for safety, shut off the car, remove the key, foot off the brake, try to pull the car out of park. Does it come out of park? It should not. It should be locked. If it does come out of park, you might have a problem with that lock solenoid that just locks the shifter for safety. In case you're sitting in your car, everything is good. You move your arm, you touch the shifter, and it moves. Now your car is rolling, and you did not. Your foot's not on the brake, the key's not on. So that's a safety feature. You want to check that works. Try to prevent spilling coffee there. I mean, I know accidents happen and things, but the problem is coffee has sugar and it could be sticky, and things kind of start sticking, and then shifter kind of becomes harder to move. Some rust, potential for rust, if it's a large amount of coffee, could unfortunately roll and go to the airbag computer. So that area of the car is kind of filled with electronics a little bit. So you want to be careful, but if everything is working fine right now, try to avoid spills and everything will be good. So, Aziz, you're asking a question in Arabic, and as you all have seen, I do speak Arabic. He's actually from my home country. So the question he's asking, I'm going to translate it. Can you clean the evaporator of the car with fridge clean? So I am planning, and I know I've mentioned this and promised you guys this, but it's been kind of pushed back. I want to make a video how to clean the evaporator on a Toyota, how to get rid of the musty smell. But the bottom line is Toyota sells the best kit that I've tried. It works really well. But the key thing here is prevention. You're only masking the issue. If you continue to do the same behavior that causes this, you're back to square one. So here's the list real quick of what you need to do for musty smell to prevent it. And when you do get it, you have to clean, then do this. First, consider always using fresh air. Do not use recirculate. When the AC is on, you have water in the evaporator case. That's just normal part of AC dehumidification. That water sits in a dark place behind the dash. That is a humid place. When there's no airflow, you're going to have mold and mildew grow. That's just the nature of things. Especially, this gets even worse when you live in a humid area or you park your car in a garage. That's as simple as that. Now, the best way to prevent it is leave it on fresh air. And if you really want to take it to the next level, as you're driving home, that last 2-3 miles, you got 10 minutes left to go home, turn off the AC, leave the fan on high, open the windows. That'll actually dry the AC case. And now you have no humidity inside, no standing water. You won't have mold or mildew. That's the whole thing that happened. Why do they happen to Toyotas when you're just driving them like you are using the AC like you did before? Because they do not have automatically engaging fresh air. You leave it on recirculate, it just stays there forever. Some other older Toyotas or even some other manufacturers that automatically disengage. Some other manufacturers won't do that. Some do. They're automatically disengaged where you can get that fresh air circulating and life is good. Some manufacturers actually even take it to a level where after the car shuts off, it'll turn on the blower motor and dry the evaporator. Toyota doesn't do that to keep things simple, but that's what you need to do to really help things. And I'll try to make a video how to use that kit and talk about all this so you can have it as a reference. But just for those who are interested in this, that's actually what happens. So Logan Miller, I asked a question a few live streams ago about my 2016 Camry shifting rough when cold. You recommend the fluid level be checked and or transmission memory reset. How could I do this DIY? So the fluid level, I have a video. You want to look it up, how to replace. It's actually how to replace the transmission fluid on a sealed transmission. You can skip the replacement part. Just watch the fluid level check part. And then the transmission memory reset, you're going to need a capable scan tool or text stream. Really not very DIY, that part of the memory reset, because you do need a scan tool. If you don't have it, it's not really worth buying one just for this one thing. Take it to a dealership, have them take care of it. But on the fluid double check, it's definitely DIY. So, David, congratulations on 100K subscribers. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, David. What do you think of wheel spacers and catch cans? I have both on my 17.4 runner, no issues. I just wanted your thoughts. So David, I don't have a problem with catch cans. On a 4Runner, it actually is purposeful because the 4Runner does not have an oil separator, but I don't expect it to do anything significant. I don't want you to spend a lot of money on things that are not really going to do anything. So the oil catch can, you have it already. It's okay. It's not going to cause harm, but it could also not cause any benefit either. The wheel spacers, I don't have a problem with them as long as they are not cheapo, unknown brand wheel spacers, because remember, you're relying on them to hold the wheels on. If they're cheap and they break, your wheel could come flying off. If you bought a good one that has good reputation, a lot of people have tried it, you should have no problem. But one thing about wheel spacers, that what their negative effect is that you need to know about, especially on a 4Runner, wheel bearings. They actually cause more load on a wheel bearing, because now your tire's sticking out. You're kind of like the same thing when you're trying to loosen a bolt with a short ratchet or the long one. It does the same thing. So expect your front wheel bearings to have a shorter life. We're not talking every 20,000 miles, but shorter than what they normally would last, which they don't exactly last very long on a 4Runner to begin with compared to other models. So keep an eye on the front wheel bearings. Every other oil change is kind of lift the front, move the tire this way, so in and out from the top and the bottom. Make sure the wheel bearing has no play, and life is good. So old base. I was in the drive-thru yesterday in my 2009 Highlander for several minutes and noticed the air temperature was barely cool on my side, but the passenger side was cold. It is dual zone climate. Now, if you search this on the internet, you'll find all kinds of information and all kinds of nightmares about, oh my God, you have to replace the doors and the AC unit and all that. But this is a very common problem with Toyotas with dual zone. And the solution is very simple. The AC charge is low. You have a leak somewhere. And this is a 2009 Highlander. Just off experience, it's probably the rear AC lines is leaking. If you have rear AC, super common on these. Nothing, can get a little pricey if you live in the Rust Belt where everything is rusty and you have to cut into things. But if you don't, it's just a line replacement or sometimes even a O-ring replacement. But get the AC charged, put some dye, see what happens. That'll probably be fixed. And then when it happens again, go and see. Same thing with the AC. Put a dye, charge it professionally. I don't like the can charge for customer cars because you can never get the level accurate 100%. It's just going to be all over the place. So you're going to want to charge the AC, put the dye, drive it with the AC working great. Could take a year, so be ready for it. Some of these leaks are tiny. So once it stops again, you have the same problem, then you'll find the leak much easier with a black light. That's what the dye does. So yeah, that problem is as simple as an AC charge, so don't worry. Richie Sullivan. Oh, here we go. Do you have access to upgrade the RAV4 radio to support Apple CarPlay? Depends what year RAV4, Richie, and some of them you can, some of them you can. Update as far as the RAV4 is potentially not available. Camry, yes. I'd have to look into that. I don't have access to it because I have access to it, but I can't do it because that has to go through the dealership. There's a little bit of drama and paperwork, and yes, there's a fly flying in the shop, so sorry about that. There's a little bit of red tape for that, if you would, so it has to be done through a dealership. But if it is possible for your RAV4, I'd have, the dealership would need the VIN number to look it up and make sure that it's possible. So Cheesy Person 33, what do you think of Mazda? I just talked about Mazda today in a comment with a viewer. I think Mazda is kind of a hidden gem. They're hidden behind the scenes. They had their time with with Ford, where things were not great, but they actually make decent cars. And I will admit humbly that I make fun of the Scion IA or Yaris IA, whatever you want to call it, that is a Mazda, not a Toyota. It's actually a pretty good car. It's well made, and we don't really see them for a lot of issues. Truth has to be said. They are good cars. I think they're good cars. Everybody I've met with a Mazda have had somewhat positive experience. Certain models with the turbos, they were no good. But your average Mazda 2, Mazda 3, Mazda 6, they seem to be happy with it. I don't really have significant experience with them except the one odd goose that we have, which is the Yaris IA. And so far, it's actually a great car. They don't really have many problems. When they first came out, there were some problems with the radio. Same thing, software update. And Mazda had the update, but we didn't, and it was kind of giant drama to get the update. But then once the update was out, that's it. We really don't see them for anything else, unless people don't buy them or don't maintain them at the dealership. That I wouldn't know. So Jesus Sanchez says, how do I keep my 2020 Camry from carbon buildup? I only drive about 50 miles to work and back. Should I take it in on long trips? How often? So I wouldn't worry about carbon buildup as much just because of your 2020 Camry, because it has dual injection, so you're good. But generally, cars, when you drive them very short distance, although 50 miles in traffic, I don't know how long it's taken you, but 50 miles is okay. That's not considered exactly a short trip. So you're saying work and back, so that's dual trip, so 7.5 miles. Yeah, that's kind of on the borderline of short trip. If you could take it on a long trip, maybe once every 3-4 weeks, maybe once a month, take it on the highway, give it a little bit of an Italian tune-up, pedal to the metal, safely within the speed limit. That should do it. If you don't want to do that, every, say 30, 40, 50,000 miles, whenever your budget allows, perhaps run an induction service if you're really worried about it. Don't overpay for these induction services. Make sure it's done by someone who's good and it's a good brand or one that actually works, and you should have no problems. Otherwise, if you don't mind taking a long trip and kind of doing the good old Italian tune-up, you should have no issues and you don't really need that induction service anymore. So Eric Kalinak, does the AC ever turn on when the Prius Prime battery is charging? Yes, only when you give it permission. Some of these, when you plug them in, I don't remember exactly when you plug them in or when you shut it off and you have a schedule set. Could be either or. That I'm going off memory here, but I'll ask you in the middle information screen, do you give permission for the AC to run? If you say yes, and unfortunately you have to, every time you do this, you have to give it permission. Once you do, it's gonna run the AC. Now, if you watch my series on how plugins work, the Prius Prime has air-cooled battery, but when you run the AC, it's gonna cool the cabin, and that air in the cabin is what the fan will take in to cool the battery. But you have to give it permission, and unfortunately, it has to be every single time that event happens. So, Asif, I have a 2020 Nissan Altima. Thoughts? No idea. Nissan is one brand I do not work on and I do not wish to work on because I've had experience with Nissan from 1980, Datsun. Great car when it ran. But they did have their good times, but apparently lately they haven't been having good times. And honestly, I'm not the person to ask. I only talk about what I know about. I give you information that I've seen over and over and over in my professional job. I don't know much about Nissans to give you a valuable opinion. So Wizard Juice, do you prefer first or second generation Scion XB? Honestly, personally, the first one, because the first one was kind of a box and it closely resembled the Yaris drivetrain wise. The second one is great. It's a really good car, but they did burn oil. They had the same engine as an 07 to 09 Camry, the 2AZ FE. Burned oil was part of the campaign, and that's their only problem, really. Otherwise, they're both good. The old one seems to be oddly more roomy inside. When you sit, you just have so much headroom, and it just feels like this experience to drive one. They're both good. If you can find one with the engine that's fixed on the second generation, it's good as well. But if you don't want to deal with that, just first generation is good. They do rust pretty bad, so be careful. So Eric Kalinak, I just answered your question, but it seems like here it's asking me if I want to use the AC, but it never seems to turn on the AC when charging. What's up with that? It should. It'll only turn on the AC when it needs it. That's the key thing there that I might have forgotten to say that in the series. It won't turn on the AC because this is not going to be to cool the cabin for you. If it doesn't need the AC, it's not going to use it. That's the key thing there. So Matfee says, I have a 2006 Yaris with 120K miles. I have no idea if the transmission fluid has been replaced before. Is it safe to change it now? That's a little bit on the high side, both mileage and age. If anything, I would check the fluid, see how it looks. Is it red? Is it dark and burned? Is it brown? If it is somewhat relatively clean, a little bit on the darker side, but still resembles some red, just a single drain and fill and call it a day. Otherwise, leave it alone because that might be a little much. Spider Logan, congratulations on your Avalon. If I'm not mistaken, you just bought that. I think I read your comment earlier. So Keith's Place, how many quarts of oil does a 2018 Camry take V6? 5.8 quarts on that one. So Glenn Nichols, I disagree with your statement the other day about Toyota fixing their problems, especially with their notorious problems of engines burning oil. Sir, everybody has an opinion, and I respect your opinion greatly, but Toyota did have a campaign, ZE7. The initial coverage was 3 years, unlimited miles. The secondary coverage was 10 years, 150,000 miles. If you were not registered as an owner, you did not get notified because they don't know who you are. So that's the first one for the 2AZ FE. They fixed all the engines in the cars affected. The Prius one did not get the oil burning fixed yet. You never know. That could change in the future. But I simply stated what I see. I think the amount of engines that I rebuilt personally was unheard of. It was, for lack of a better term, they basically, their most popular cars got engines rebuilt from top to bottom. No expense was spared, and $0 were paid by the owners. So that's what happened with the oil consumption. Did they fix all of them? Potentially no, but they fixed some of them, and some other manufacturers don't even do that. So that was what I was referring to in my video today. So Harrison's World, my mom's car stopped because my dad put too much oil, 2002 RAV4. Yeah, unfortunately, when you overfill them with oil, sometimes things go a little south. You do want to lower the level and see what happens. I hope nothing got damaged there. So, Carlos B, what can cause a clunking noise on the front side of a 2012 Toyota Camry SE? What components do I check? First thing is front sway bar links. Are they loose? Here's the bar that comes from the suspension, and this is the sway bar link. You're going to hold the bar. Sorry, I'm doing this upside down. You hold the bar and hold the top of the sway bar and just kind of pull on it with force. You're going to feel a very light, almost can't feel it click. That's a bad sway bar because they're loaded. So you're not going to be able just to move them like that most of the time. The second thing is strut mounts are also something that is coming up and is becoming somewhat common with these. So check those two is what I would start with. So ZD, thoughts on why Toyota South Africa uses 15W40 in all their new vehicles while other car manufacturers in South Africa use 5W30. Always follow the manufacturer recommendation. And I say this with my heart kind of cringing. 15W40 in a Toyota is just unheard of. But again, climate is different. Your car designs are different. Your market, your OEM market is different. Emission standards are different. There's a lot of differences between these same cars for different markets that you gotta go with what your market recommendation is. Weather is different. Different engines. That's another thing. I don't know if what you were referring to is a diesel potentially. You guys, I know you guys have diesels in South Africa. Go by what's recommended. There is no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it's many reasons. Sometimes even emissions. It's simple as that sometimes. But follow your recommended oil in the owner's manual for your country, not other places. If you're like the 0W16, many people have told me that some countries do not require 0W16. They can use 020, even 520. Okay, use it, but not in the US, because in the US and in certain places, it explicitly tells you 0W16 only, not 0W20. If you use 0W20, you got to go back and use 016 on the next time. So follow your manual on this one. Daniel, I have a P0333 code in my 2005 Lexus RX. Knock sensor too high. Is there anything I can try to fix it, or do I need to replace? It's quite a DIY job. It's not a bad job. I mean, it's a little involved, but not crazy where we're talking something extremely complicated. But if you're going to go there, replace both knock sensors and replace the wire harness. That way you're going in once and be done with it. That's typically what it is. Really, there's not much else that will cause this unless there's rodent damage or other stuff, which is not likely. Given the age of the car, it's probably just that. Pizza Smith dude, why 0W16 and no Toyotas? And is it harmful to just use 0W20? I know they can run 20, but the recommendation is to go back to 16, 5,000 miles. So I just mentioned this. Folks, let's just go back and say this. The engineers tested this engine at 0W16. They approved it for 0W16. We're talking about Toyota here. We're not talking about some other company that just finishes the engine today, and before the glue is dry, it's already in a customer car. This is a company that tests their stuff, and they try their best to cover all bases. Sometimes they'll mess up, make mistakes. Sure, they're humans, of course. But for the most part, they're trying their honest-to-God best effort to not make mistakes. When they approved this engine for 0W16, yes, some people will say it's water, all this, but they thoroughly tested it that this engine will be reliable to the company standard for the advertised mileage, for the advertised age, for our general company image. So when you use 0W16, because we told you to as a company, you're not going to have problems after 5 years and then, oh, well, we've been using water. We can't. No, they thoroughly tested that. If you go to 0W20, especially on some of the engines, the 825, the dynamic force engines, they did so much to get this engine to this low thermal efficiency that you go and put 15W40 in that engine, all that goes out of the window. And now it's not emission compliant. And now they're in hot waters because you do not want to follow their recommendation. But now they have a way back to say, that's on you. And worse, we've had issues where that engine has a very delicate oiling system. It is computer controlled and it needs those pressures to be right. So when you go using 0W20, and yes, the difference between 0W20 and 0W16 is not significant, but still, you want to use your recommended oil from the manufacturer. They're not lying to you. They're not doing this just for emissions. Use the recommended oil and you will have no problems. They're not gonna just tell you to use an oil that's incorrect just to save face for the environment. That's not how Toyota works. So Geo, 2015 Toyota Corolla S, 115,000 miles, full transmission service, oil and filter, or just oil replacement. At this miles, I would not want to take the oil pan, drop everything, just drain and fill, call it a day, and life is good. I wouldn't worry about anything else. So the Mongoose 87, is TRD Pro Tundra suspension worth the money or just the SR5 and upgrade suspension? Honestly, I was just talking about this with a viewer who had their car here. We were filming something for you guys. If you're going to buy the TRD Pro, you're locked in the TRD Pro. You're not locked, but then it wouldn't make sense. Because I see people buy the TRD Pro, and then they throw that suspension that they paid a small fortune for and upgrade it. If you have plans to upgrade this truck, I guess the better question is, what do you want to do with this truck? Do you want it to be capable right off the bat and you don't have to do anything to it and just drive it and enjoy it? Then buy the TRD Pro. But if you plan to upgrade it and change things, then just get an SR5, which has good options, but has the basic suspension, and then you get to choose what to upgrade and what to buy. But it really depends on your preference. Are you the modifying type, or you want to take things to the next level, then buy the SR5 and go from there. If you just want to buy a package that's already done, that's already capable, and you're happy and content with it, just go with the TRD Pro. So let's see here. So David, what's a realistic mileage to change the serpentine belt? I have a 2017 4Runner with 70,000 miles. Is it worth doing it now, or is it okay to wait to 100,000 miles? Serpentine belt is not a maintenance item, David, and everybody. Do not change the serpentine belt unless you have a concern. Is it cracked? Is it worn down, not glazed? Is it worn down? Is it, what are you replacing the serpentine belt? Toyota makes some of the best serpentine belts I've ever seen. I'll tell you this, my 2012 I don't want to sound like Scotty Kilmer, my 94 Celica, but my 2012 Camry, which is total, it had about, I don't know, 90 something thousand miles, whatever the case may be. It had the original timing belt. And no, sorry, not timing belt, original serpentine belt. I never replaced it because there was no need to. It was not cracked. It was not worn down. Life was good. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Then it absolutely applies to the belt. If you don't see a reason to replace it, don't replace it. If you see a reason to replace it right away and be done with it. Don't put a mile interval to this one. I wouldn't worry about it unless you have an issue. So Tim Miller, thank you so much for joining the live stream, sir. I appreciate it. So Dipsy Friday just purchased a 2013 RX 350, 113,000 miles. Previous owner didn't keep up good maintenance record. Aside from fluids and filters, should the plugs be replaced? So you're not at the plug interval yet. You're probably going to get, I don't know how much you drive, 120,000 miles or 10 years on those plugs. You're going to want to replace them when you get to that and life is good. One thing about that engine, now that I'm remembering, because Lexus started earlier with the updated engine, read your maintenance guide. Some of those had 60,000 mile plug, which in that case, you want to replace them right away. If it does have the 120,000 mile plugs, you're good. Wait till 120 and life's good. Other than the fluids and filters, which you're already taking care of, you're all good. And hopefully you can keep up with the maintenance and make up for the previous owner not doing so. So, Cell Tester, my 2015 Prius says to rotate the tires front to back. I've always rotated them in an X pattern before. Shouldn't be a problem. You can either do either or. There is not exactly big benefits from doing the X other than it being kind of a pain to do. But you could just rotate front to back and you're going to have no issues. So the Mongoose 87, my 2021 Toyota TRD Pro has a weird chirp sound when we first start moving. That could be the ABS unit running its self-test. Very common, very normal, nothing to worry about. However, I would have to hear the noise. You're welcome to record a YouTube video and send me the link in any comment or any of the videos. I'll take a listen, let you know. But usually these things require in person where we listen to it, hear the noise, and see what's going on. So guys, we're nearing the end. Let's do this. Let's take 5 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up and call it a day. So Scott Lanini, my 2021 Tacoma off-road steering feels stiff sometimes. Have to hold the steering left or right to go straight. Is this normal for Tacomas? Tacoma doesn't have exactly the most on-center feel. It's kind of a truck. And the illustration is a truck. That's just how they are. Unfortunately, that's the thing with Tacomas. They don't have an exact great on-center feel. They don't have a very good high-speed stability. Some people will pick up on it, some people won't. But yeah, that is unfortunately normal. And you can try to tweak the alignment a little bit to make it better potentially. Check your tire pressures. But in the end, I don't want to set the expectation here that there's a problem. There's no problem. That's just the way they are. You could maybe make it slightly better, but not significantly better. So Michael John, what Toyota vehicle is the best for heavy rains and flooding streets? Land Cruiser, 4Runner, trucks, high ones, because FJ Cruiser is a good one. Doesn't even have carpet. But you do not want to drive through a flood. You're going to see a shorts video here when I get a chance to work on it and send it. You're going to see the kind of damage that happens when you drive a car through a flood. Not carpet, and this is nothing. Engine damage. Yes, engine damage. Engines can't take in water from a flood, and everything goes south from there. So, guys, we're going to take 3 more questions. I'm going to go randomly through just to pick some of the others. But before we do that, somebody asked, what is the difference between the Camry and the Avalon? Camry is the Camry. The Avalon is a stretch Camry. Literally, they're very similar. They're the same. Avalon is more geared toward luxury. It has more features here and there, but it's essentially very similar car. The way it drives, the way it handles, everything else. So basically, one is like the Camry is the small, not small, the normal size, and the other one is extra large. Let's put it this way. So let's do this one. Abel Caldrila. Sorry if I'm not reading your name right. I apologize. So I own a 1999 Tacoma SR5, 68,000 miles, garage for 15 years. Man, you have a nice truck there. Good idea to flush the brake and clutch fluid. Absolutely. The one thing about the fluid, and now that this thing's sat, before you go driving it out and about, the clutch might just sink to the floor, and all the seals are gone because that brake fluid really doesn't do well with moisture and everything. You might need to replace master cylinder, master and slave cylinder for the clutch. Expect that. Don't just start driving far away. Now you're stranded somewhere because the brakes popped, or the master cylinder or the slave cylinder on the clutch. Just the clutch will just fall to the floor and not come up again. So if you want to do that, flush the fluid, drive it around, kind of local in case something happens, kind of hard brake applications, clutch multiple times, see what happens. If any of them fail, you're going to have to replace those. Okay. Let's take one more question. So Travis Cade, this is an interesting question. Uncle Scotty said that newer Toyotas have a special undercoating that prevents rust. Is this true? Should I still do an undercoating because I live in upstate New York? Do they have a special undercoating? They don't. Should you do an undercoating on newer cars? Potentially, and here's why I say potentially. The newer Toyotas are really covered by plastic. They're plastic covers. They're not coating or anything special. The plastic coating, not the plastic coating, the plastic covers, they really help cover most of the bottom of the car. So when you're spraying, you have to take them down, spray underneath them if you really want to do it right. Otherwise, there's little patches here and there where you can spray. So undercoating, it's either going to be done right by somebody who's going to actually take the covers down, spray the bottom of the car, not spray over the plastic. That's not really going to protect anything. Or you're just going to let it be and drive and hope for the best. That's what my recommendation is. As far as special coating, perhaps Uncle Scotty was referring to them having a lot of covers and not really be as exposed as previous cars where they were open. But as far as special coating for rust, they do not. They just have the same thing as before. So this question doesn't count. Pizza Smith Dude, 1999 Camry coolant reservoir running low every 200 miles. No external leaks. Replace the radiator cap. What's the next step? So you got to pressure test this. Is the water pump leaking? Is the radiator leaking? I know you said no external leaks, but you got to really dive in and look, because if you've checked everything, there's absolutely no leaks. Head gasket. There's no other place coolant can go other than external or head gasket internally. So let's take two more questions. How about that? Because I kind of lost count here of the 5. I'll be honest with you. This is a good one. Clark Manuel, 2020 Camry would have a ticking noise from the engine and it would disappear, but just wondering what can this be? This is very typical. Direct injection. It's very annoying in these new engines, but that's the way they are. There's no problem. Every time it's direct injection is running, you can hear that really loud tapping. I did have a video on the spark plugs where you can hear it, how loud it is. That's normal. Nothing to worry about. Nothing's going to blow up. That's just the way the engine noise needs to be for the direct injections to run. Nothing you could really do about that. So, folks, let's take the last question. And as the typical standard of this live stream. We're going to take the last questions. T, sorry, I messed this up. T, we're still going to take your question. The last is always first. T, will the underbody guard to protect catalytic converters interferes with maintenance? Typically, no. I've seen the one on the Prius. We're talking about aftermarket ones just to cover the catalytic converter so when it gets stolen. Usually they don't. I've seen the one on the Prius. They're in the front. They don't really interfere with maintenance operations. If anything, they don't interfere with anything, honestly. Just the catalytic converter. If you want to remove the exhaust, kind of a pain. But as far as maintenance, fluid changes, whatnot, no, they don't really interfere with anything. If it is the same one that I'm talking about, just I think, I don't remember what it was called, Cat Shield or whatever it is. But most of them that are made well, not made in some shed in the backyard, they thought of this and they designed them well where they don't interfere. So I hope that answers your question. Folks, we want to talk a little bit. First of all, if you've been enjoying this live stream, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not enjoying this live stream, put a thumbs down. That's okay. If you want your answer, I know there's some folks have mentioned this. If you need your question answered, please consider leaving a comment on any of my videos. I usually try to get back to you. The email and the social media account, the private chat or whatever, that has kind of got out of hand. I'm trying, but I have family to focus on, so I can't really do everything at the same time. But if you have a question, your best way to get an answer is comment on any of the videos. Doesn't matter what it is. Just comment on any of the videos, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And we have a lot of content coming up. Many of you have been very patiently waiting for some new Highlander content. That is, as promised, coming up. And I did film the video on my dream car. You're going to see that coming up sometime soon for those that wanted to see it. Hope that will be fun. That will be potentially not educational, but maybe educational a little bit. It was fun for me to make, and it actually went very smooth, surprisingly. So that's good. Guys, I thank you so much for joining the live stream. I hope you learned something new from it. And one thing, the next live stream will be next Saturday at 7 p.m. I will still announce it through the channel. So you'll see it. And you might have noticed this, but if you come early, you can actually catch your question and get it done. If not, just leave a comment in the channel. We've got your back. But until the next live stream, guys, thank you so much for coming in. And until the next one, may the Lord bless you and keep you. And you guys have yourself a wonderful Saturday there.